Hey guys, make sure you're hanging out right after the end of the review to answer our question of the day. And now, let's get to talking about this bad boy right here. What's up everybody, Brandon here from Gearist. Today we're going to be going in depth with the new Saucony Kinvara 7. You know, it's really something when products get into a kind of legacy evolutions of what they are. And for that to happen, two things have to take place. Number one, the evolutions of that product have to make sense. They have to be something that's constantly improving or changing for the better. And number two, the loyalists of that product have to really be on board with it. If you just keep changing it for a new audience, you're not going to have those loyalists around and they're not going to be the best advocates for your particular product that you're looking for. However, with the Saucony Kinvara 7, we see that this thing is getting well into the high numbers. With its 4mm drop, really great ground feel, and super loyal fan base, this is an extremely popular shoe that is now in its 7th iteration, and we can see it coming for a lot of years to come. In case you're wondering where I am today, we're out here at Wampatuck State Park in Hingham, Massachusetts for the Thanksgiving holiday. So before we get into the rest of today's review, I want to take a second to say thank you guys for watching and happy Thanksgiving to all of you. Now, despite the fact that this shoe right here does not come out until March 1st of 2016, we were fortunate enough to get our hands on it, so let's take a look at this guy. Starting with the outsole, this is probably one of the biggest aesthetic changes, if nothing else, from its original shoe. Usually we're used to looking at a bunch of triangles that are around in this area, but in this version, Saucony's gone with an entirely new setup. Yes, they're still using IBR Plus and XT900 rubber to, you know, take care of the different types of abrasion that happen in different areas, but overall it's a super huge change. Now as we look at the shoe, these green areas right here and then down here, this is the XT900 rubber. So that rubber is being placed in areas which need particularly high abrasion wear. Now right down here in the lateral heel, if you're somebody who lands on the heel of the foot hits the ground in the heel first, or when you toe off up here, these are areas that are going to get worn down quickly, so they need a more high impact rubber. Now if you compare this to previous versions of the Kinvara, these are exactly the same place as it was. It's just the different shape and everything like that. This is definitely a case of not messing with what works, while still changing the overall design aesthetic. Now the orange rubber that we can see here, that is Saucony's IBR Plus, which is injection blown rubber plus. Now this material is not just meant to provide durability in those areas, though not as much as the XT900 rubber. It's also meant to actually provide a little bit of cushion and enhanced ground feel. Once again, this is largely placed exactly the place that the IBR Plus triangles were placed in previous versions of the shoe, but in this instance, because of these flex grooves that can happen in between the little chevrons there, it adds a good deal of flexibility to that area. It doesn't subtract from it, I guess is what we're saying, even though these larger portions of rubber are taking up space where the triangles had kind of a cut through. In this case, this does a good job of keeping the flexibility where it's been in other iterations of the shoe, which is something that a lot of Kinvara users like. In terms of general wear on this guy, you can see that right about there, I don't know if you're going to be able to see, there's a little bit of accelerated wear as opposed to the XT900 rubber in the IBR Plus rubber right there, because I land very midfoot. I would really like to see this shoe extend this IBR Plus up the outside. Sure, there'd probably be a little bit of a weight sacrifice, but for me, it's definitely worth it to have that extended wear. I still think that this is a shoe that you could easily get, you know, 400 or 500 miles out of as your general road shoe. And to be honest, I used the Kinvara 5 in Ironman Chattanooga 2014 and had zero problems through the entire training cycle and into the race itself. So overall, the durability and the placement, the new design of the outsole, I like a lot. Again, as I mentioned in other models though, extending that IBR Plus up the lateral side would be, I think, a definite addition to the shoe. As we move into the midsole, this is probably one of the places where this shoe has the most change, actual change, but the kicker is that you can't really see it. The first thing is that they've gone from using EVA Plus foam in this midsole to using SSL EVA, although EVA Plus does still appear as the outsole grade EVA down here. SSL EVA is really meant to be one of those things that enhances the longevity of the shoe, provides for less material breakdown, and really enhances the appearance of the star of this new midsole, and that is Saucony's new EVERUN material. As a lot of other brands are doing these days, Saucony is really trying to find something that's going to be a more resilient material and still give you that impact, that kind of spring back without material breakdown super fast. Now in this shoe, Saucony's actually put the EVERUN material in a place underneath the heel. Now you can't really see it again because it's kind of dropped in there. So we wanted to know exactly why do they do that in the heel and not into the forefoot of the shoe, or basically the whole midsole. When we reached out to a developer from Saucony, they were a huge help and explained that they didn't just throw it in the heel and that was that. They did extensive wear testing, and based on different arrangements, both in the heel alone, in the forefoot alone, or under the entire foot, the preference overwhelmingly came out to be that in the heel, because when you're landing on the heel, you want that kind of cushion or that spring. Also, when you're landing on the midfoot or forefoot, ideally you're letting that heel settle into the ground, and this is again giving you a little bit of that eccentric muscle action, that feeling, that kind of spring off of the heel after your heel settles, secondary to the midfoot or the forefoot. So this was definitely something that they really thought about a lot, and in the ride section in a minute, I'll give you my impressions. Another thing about the midsole of this shoe that I think shows up really, really well is that flexibility that I mentioned earlier. Now, there is quite a bit of spring in this shoe. There's a lot of pop, and one of the things that's interesting is that when you start to fold it up, it doesn't fold in half really. It maintains a nice curvature, which is actually really, really interesting. In a lot of other shoes, that foam is going to have a quick breakdown, but this maintains a nice curvature throughout, flexes front to back, very flexible shoe, and works with the foot very well. The upper is something that I've always really liked in the Kinvara series, and this is no exception. Now, the first thing I'll mention is the design. We really don't comment on that much because I don't want to subject anyone else to my design choices, but in this case, this green fading into black is kind of a nod to the green, the fluorescence of the past 7 or 8 years, fading into the more old school black. And it's really walking a nice line, because a lot of people are out there saying, hey, what about the more muted colors that we've been used to in the past? Personally, I like the loudness, and so this kind of can appease both of those runners. As in years past, for the support structure of the upper, Saucony is using their flex film, which you can see right here. And on this version of the shoe, once again, they're using it in really great places where the foot might work against the material and trying to break it down. Basically, they put an entire almost rand around the shoe right here. It goes all the way around back to here, which is really gonna, if you're kind of driving forward in the foot, in the shoe rather, that's gonna keep the material solid. And again, where that material flexes in the forefoot right there, they've got an overlay right there, which you can see the Saucony logo on it, that's really gonna reinforce the mesh underneath and keep everything solid. In the roughly 45 miles of pretty intense stuff sometimes that I've got on this shoe, there's no breakdown of that at all. Now, if you're taking this on trail or something like that, where you might pick the material on a branch or a stick or what have you, something like that might break it down. So when people decide to talk about how a shoe is acting and the material might be breaking down, be sure you're blaming the material and not just the fact that you're running and brushing up against a rock all the time. The mesh in the Kinvara 7 seems to be a nice upgrade. Up here on the front, again, we've got a very fine mesh, and then a little bit more open around the back here, around the heel and the back half of the foot. Also, this is lined on the inside with something that's a little more fine to keep out fine debris and dust and things like that. It's very flexible, flexes nicely over top of the foot, and it's very comfortable. Something else that we're seeing in this version that has appeared in the Kinvara 5 and 6 is the ProLock, the ProLock system that Saucony started using here. And in this version, the last version that I really wore a lot was the Kinvara 5. And in that version, it was obvious that you could feel kind of where the ProLock system attached underneath the upper here. In this version, it's really disappeared. It's nicely integrated into the rest of this upper, and it's something that I really like. They really took a lot of consideration with this and got rid of the feeling of that additional strap being there. Again, in that case, it wasn't something that stood out to me as being annoying. It was just something that I noticed, and in this, I don't notice it at all, so kudos. The heel counter in this version is a fairly kind of flexible, rigid thing here, but then about halfway up, it goes to being flexible. This is actually not unlike the deconstructed heel counter that we saw in the New Balance Vazzy Pace. Then, of course, we've got my personal pet peeve, and that is the foam. The foam around the collar here and on the tongue is actually really, really nice. Coated by the run-dry fabric that you can see right there, which is going to keep the foot from sweating profusely, and if it does, it's going to absorb it and wick it away from the skin. This material is nice. It keeps everything solid in here. There's not too much foam, not too little foam. They might be able to get away with a little bit less, but I really, if I'm not whining about it, then it's not too much. Overall, the upper of this shoe is really, again, a nice highlight. In all Kinvaras, they've done a great job. Now, of course, some people have had durability issues here and there, but in this version, I think people are gonna really, really be happy. And overall, that upper is gonna really be a compliment to the speed, durability, and endurance that you're gonna find out of this shoe. Moving into the fit, the first thing that I'll say is that my size 11 fits just like all Saucony Kinvara Kinvaras have fit to this point, and pretty much all Saucony shoes have fit to this point. I don't see any reason to go up or down in sizing unless you find that consistently with yourself in Saucony products. Also, this guy in a size 11 comes in at 8.9 ounces, which is consistent with most recent Kinvaras of this type. Now let's start in the heel with the fit of the shoe. I feel like the heel counter is nice and just very subtle. It forms a nice heel cup internally with that great cup sock liner, but it's just subtle. It doesn't really lock down on the foot or anything like that, so I found it very comfortable. Moving into the midfoot, I really like the Pro Lock a lot. It feels good on my foot. I like the way I can cinch things down. The one thing that I do wonder about is if somebody had a wider foot and wanted to wear this guy. I'm not sure how it would fit them, because while there is room in the laces to expand, I'm not sure how the Pro Lock would feel around that and how really it would work, because at some point it's going to be squeezing in instead of wrapping. So I'm just not sure about that. And that toe box is just straight up classic Kinvara. For me, it's, you know, really tons of room to wiggle and splay and all that kind of stuff. Very comfortable, even on some longer runs. So way to stick with what works, Saucony. And now talking about the ride of this shoe, and again, this is where that new EVERUN material is going to come in. The first thing I'd like to say about it is that this is not a bouncy material, something like Adidas Boost foam or something. You're not going to find that amount of spring in this, and that's not what it's for either. Particularly since the application is only in the heel of the shoe and not a full length thing or a thicker pod of it. But what did it feel like when I was running? Now, if you know me or you've heard any of our reviews by me at all, then you know I'm a pretty solid midfoot, forefoot runner, and that's no different in this shoe at all. So the first 4 miles or so of any run, what I felt like was it was pretty similar to other Kinvaras, and I like that, don't get me wrong, I love the other Kinvaras. However, it was 4 or 5 miles into these runs where I really started to notice the difference. And again, as Saucony said with their testing, this is what they noticed, is that people generally preferred the heel. Now, I'm not saying that I would not love to try a full-length piece of the EVERUN material and the midsole of one of these shoes, but in this case, what I felt was that as I let my heels begin to settle more into the ground, I really started getting that bounce back. I started getting that extra help with the eccentric muscle action in that area. And to be honest, it was very, very comfortable, and my legs at the end of a run did not nearly feel as gassed as they might otherwise. So I really like this material, but again, I will say, and just put the caveat out there, that even though Saucony's done all the testing, I would love to see a full-length version of this shoe, full-length EVERUN version of this shoe. I also found that the flexibility in this shoe is really nice, but it doesn't sacrifice on that poppiness, that kind of springback that you expect from a Kinvara or a more racy kind of oriented shoe. And I will say that running slow in this shoe was tricky. Now, that's for me, of course. Other people, their slow is my fast. But, you know, running really slow and just going out and taking it super slow is something that was a challenge for sure. Once again, Saucony's done a great job with their versions of the Kinvara. And newbies to the Kinvara series and old school people like me that have been around since version 1 are really gonna like it a lot. Everybody is. It's a very consistent version with the way that it wears. With the way that it rides, you're gonna get that consistent Kinvara feel, but the addition of that EVERUN material is gonna get you a little bit more energy, especially as you begin to fatigue into the back of the shoe there, which I like a lot. As far as bang for your buck goes, again, this is a really great value at $110, especially for a really well-loved high-end shoe that's going to be able to take you anywhere from your training days to 5Ks, 10Ks, marathons, ultra marathons, and whatever you want to run in it. The Saucony Kinvara 7 is a super solid shoe, and we can't wait to see what you guys think. Now, before we get to the question of the day, if you liked this video, don't forget to give us a like and favorite and subscribe to our channel, and maybe even leave a comment. Our question for you guys today is, what of the Kinvara series that you've tried so far, 1 through 6, I'm guessing, what of the Kinvara series is your favorite if you've tried it? And if you haven't tried it, we'd love to know why. Give us a shout down in the comment section below and let us know. Guys, thanks so much for taking a few minutes with us today. If you've got any questions for us, don't forget to leave those down in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to visit Gearist.com, where you can see all of our features, news, and reviews, whatever you want to know about. It's all right there. Thanks again, guys, and we'll see you next time.